The world's most notorious serial killers. Life behind bars. Death row stories. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the final words. You are hereby sentenced to death. Ted Bundy, one of the most feared killers in American history, stood there with a cold smile on his face. Reporters wrote down every detail, while people outside cheered that justice had finally come. But behind the walls of that courtroom, fear still lingered. People wondered, how could someone who looked so normal, so charming, hide such terrible secrets? Bundy wasn't the only one. In prison cells across America, men and women who once terrorized cities now sat in chains, some waiting for death row, others locked away for life. Each of them had a story so dark that it changed how police, courts, and ordinary families thought about safety. They weren't just criminals. They became symbols of evil. Take Jeffrey Dahmer, for example. His crimes shook the entire country in the early 1990s. By the time police entered his small Milwaukee apartment, they uncovered horrors that were almost impossible to believe. Neighbors who thought he was just a quiet man suddenly realized he had been living among them with unthinkable secrets. When Dahmer was captured, people were shocked to learn how long he had gone unnoticed. It raised tough questions. How could so many warning signs be ignored? How did he slip past the eyes of neighbors, landlords, and even the police? His trial became a turning point in how America talked about mental illness, safety, and the failures of law enforcement. But Dahmer's prison life was another story. Locked away for life, he was no longer the hunter. He was the hunted. Inmates saw him as a target, and guards struggled to protect him. His end came not through the courts, but from another prisoner who decided to take justice into his own hands. That shocking moment once again made headlines worldwide. Then there was John Wayne Gacy, a man who lived a double life. To the public, he was the friendly neighbor, the man who dressed as a clown at children's parties. But under his home, police found the remains of dozens of young men. The contrast between his smiling clown face and the horrors buried beneath his floorboards haunted America for years. When Gacy faced execution, many people felt relief, but also unease. How could someone hide such darkness for so long, right in the middle of a quiet suburban street? His story showed that evil doesn't always look scary on the outside. It can wear a friendly smile, a funny costume, or even the face of a trusted friend. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, spread fear across California in the 1980s. Breaking into homes in the dead of night, his crimes were random and brutal. Families locked their doors tighter, neighbors stopped trusting one another, and the entire state lived in fear. When he was finally caught, the relief was so strong that crowds nearly rioted just to catch a glimpse of him being taken away. Ramirez's time in prison was filled with attention. Some people were horrified by him, while others, shockingly, sent him letters as if he were a celebrity. The fascination showed how crime could twist not only the lives of victims, but also the minds of people who watched from the outside. It was a reminder that crime stories don't just end when the criminal is caught. They leave a mark that lasts for years. And then came Aileen Wuornos. Unlike most serial killers, she was a woman. Her story was filled with pain, abuse, and desperation. She targeted men who picked her up while she worked on the streets of Florida. When she was finally arrested, the nation was divided. Was she pure evil, or was she shaped by the violence she had suffered her whole life? As she walked toward her execution, her final words shocked everyone, leaving behind a chilling silence that still echoes today. Death row is unlike any other place in prison. The air feels heavier, and silence hangs in the halls like a shadow. Every step of the guards echoes against the cold walls, reminding inmates that their time is running out. Some of the most notorious killers in history spent their final days here, counting down the hours before they faced justice. Ted Bundy was one of them. In his final years, he lived inside Florida State Prison, cut off from the outside world. He received letters from strangers, some begging him to confess, others strangely offering support. Reporters lined up to interview him, desperate to hear his final words. On the night of his execution, crowds gathered outside the prison, cheering as sparks from the electric chair signaled the end of one of America's darkest figures. Jeffrey Dahmer's fate was even more violent. Though sentenced to life and not death row, he couldn't escape the hatred of fellow inmates. In 1994, while cleaning a prison bathroom, another prisoner attacked him with a metal bar, ending his life in seconds. Some saw it as prison justice, while others wondered if the system had failed by not protecting him. Aileen Wuornos' final days were filled with tension. She sat in a small Florida cell, speaking to the few people who visited her. When the day came, she was led to the execution chamber. Her last words were rambling and strange, a mixture of anger and prophecy, leaving witnesses uneasy. To this day, people debate whether she was purely evil or a victim of a life filled with violence. Inside these prisons, guards often speak of the strange silence after an execution. Inmates who once shouted across the halls grow quiet, reminded that their turn is coming. Some begin to pray, others sink deeper into madness, and a few accept their fate calmly. The weight of death row changes everyone, even those who have seen it all. But not all notorious killers in America faced execution. Some, like David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, were sentenced to life in prison instead. Berkowitz claimed he found religion behind bars, calling himself Son of Hope. To some, it was a sign of change. To others, it was just another mask, a new role for a man who had once terrorized New York City. Across maximum security prisons, these names became legends whispered by inmates. To some prisoners, they were monsters. To others, they were strange heroes. The fascination didn't end with their deaths or life sentences. Books, movies, and documentaries kept their stories alive, shaping the way America thinks about crime and punishment. But deep inside the prisons, where cameras aren't allowed and stories rarely leave the walls, there are tales that still send shivers down the spine. Guards claim they hear footsteps at night when no one is there. Inmates whisper about cursed cells where the most infamous killers once lived. And some believe that the evil of these criminals didn't end with their death, that it still lingers, trapped behind bars, waiting to be heard again. The lives and deaths of the world's most notorious serial killers tell us more than just stories of violence. They reveal how thin the line is between ordinary life and unthinkable horror. Men like Ted Bundy, who smiled and charmed his way into people's trust, showed that evil can hide in plain sight. Jeffrey Dahmer proved how long someone could slip through the cracks of society, living next door while hiding secrets too dark to imagine. John Wayne Gacy reminded America that a friendly clown at a child's party could be far more dangerous than anyone suspected. Each case forced the country to rethink what safety really means. Inside prison walls, their final days played out under the watchful eyes of guards, reporters, and the world. Some met death in the electric chair, their names forever tied to punishment. Others wasted away in lonely cells, where time became their slow executioner. A few, like Dahmer, faced violent ends at the hands of other inmates, as if prison itself delivered its own version of justice. Whether they faced death row or life behind bars, none of them escaped the legacy of fear they created. But the fascination never ended at the prison gates. People across the United States, and even the world, continue to study these cases. Documentaries, books, and films revisit their stories again and again. Some ask how these criminals were able to get away with their crimes for so long. Others wonder how police and the justice system changed because of them. From DNA evidence to psychological profiling, law enforcement developed new tools in direct response to these cases, hoping to prevent the next Bundy or Ramirez. At the same time, these killers left behind questions we may never fully answer. Were they born evil, or were they shaped by broken childhoods and violent experiences? Could society have stopped them earlier, or were they always destined to carry out such crimes? These debates continue in classrooms, courtrooms, and living rooms across the country. The fascination isn't just about the crimes, it's about what those crimes say about us as human beings. For the families of victims, however, the story is far more personal. Their lives were shattered by people whose names the world now remembers. Each trial, each execution, and each documentary reopens wounds that never fully heal. Behind every headline and courtroom scene are families who still carry the weight of loss. For them, justice is not about fascination or history. It's about lives that were stolen and futures that were destroyed. Yet, despite the pain and horror, these stories carry one final message. Society refuses to look away. By telling these stories, by remembering the victims and examining the lives of the killers, we hope to understand how such evil can exist and how to stop it from happening again. The cold cells of death row may have silenced the voices of these criminals, but the lessons they left behind remain alive. In the end, the world's most notorious serial killers did more than just terrify communities. They changed the way America sees justice, safety, and even trust. Their names are forever carved into history, not as legends to be admired, but as warnings of what can happen when evil goes unnoticed for too long. Behind the prison walls and execution chambers lies a chilling reminder: the story of crime never truly ends. Because as long as human nature is capable of darkness, society will always live with the question: who might be hiding in plain sight, and what horrors could they be planning next?